And we are live. It seems like hello, namaskar, everybody, all my friends out there all over the world. Good evening from slightly rainy Kolkata today. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good midday, wherever you are. I am very, very excited today because today, right now, is the premiere episode of a series that I'm starting, which is called Unlock Jam Room. Unlock Jam Room is going to be a series of conversations, interviews, discussions, talks, chats with some really, really special people, artists, musicians, dancers, filmmakers, all these people that I've been very, very fortunate to be associated with in terms of work and in terms of my life. I'm especially excited today because my guest for the premiere episode is a man who needs absolutely no introduction. Tabla Maestro, fusion legend, composer, multi-percussionist, and most of all, most importantly for me, my very, very close, dear personal friend and my big brother, my mentor, my idol. So in one word, it's Maestro BICKRAM GHOSH. Now, there is no point in me telling you who Maestro BICKRAM GHOSH is, but I have to tell you this much, that he is one of the most special people in my entire journey as a musician, as a tabla player, as an artist, as a percussionist, and as a visionary. So I will be inviting him to join our chat, and as soon as Bikramda sends me an invite, a request, I will invite him into the chat, and then we will go from there and start jamming. Until I see his invite, I have to say that I'm really, really thankful to all of you who are already here. I see a lot of you already here, and I'm really thrilled because today's conversation is going to be a conversation based on a relationship for, this October, which this October it will be 24 years that I have been here. We are, and I invited the maestro, waiting for him to be joined in. We will talk more about.
Hello.
Okay, so I know I don't usually do this, and it's not allowed between us, but Shashtang Pranam to you.
Oh, please, Mayookhb. Okay,
Abs-
big hug, big hug. Lots
okay,
of love.
Shashtang hug.
Okay.
Shashtang hug.
Ah, yeah, that's nice.
Oh
Absolutely.
my. Vikranda, before we get into a discussion, there is something that I have to get out of the way, and
Right.
that is that it's been 24 years. This October is going to be 24 years that you've been in my life, and
Yes.
I have said this to you many times in many different ways, but this is a public place, and I want to say this publicly with you
Mm-hmm.
as witness. I've had many gurus, as you know, starting from Pandit Gyan Prakash Ghosh, Gyan Dalu, to Sabir Khan Saab, to Zakir Ji, to Shekhar Uncle, to Pandit Birju Maharaj Ji,
Of
all these
course.
people that I've learned from. But
Absolutely.
the one person that I have an illustrious record of, I'm very lucky, very blessed. The term is Guru Bhagya,
Ah,
the fate of having gurus. But there is one silent guru that I have that has not been officialized, and that is you. That is you.
oh,
Because
I'm honored, and I'm truly that really touches me.
it's absolutely true, Vikram, because from the day I met you, um, I'm talking about New York days and California days, LA. I remember the very first concert that I played with Pandit Tarun Bhattacharya
Yeah.
uh, was an episode where you had a date booked with Karthik Shishadri to go and play with him. And there was a house concert booking at, as far as I remember, Mala Ganguly or somebody's house.
Uh-huh.
And you were not available for the concert. So, and I had never played with him, and I had no idea how to do that. So you actually sat me down, and you walked me through the entire process of accompanying Tarunda in an entire concert. Like, who does that, Vikram? You know, like only a guru does
Uh,
that. Only a guru does that.
or a
And
dada.
that was just one off incident. After that, all the things that you have done in your life, in your career, to inspire all the things that I'm such a wannabe Bikram Ghosh. I'm telling you, like I'm a shameless copycat. I'm telling you, and like I have no shame in saying this, and you know, I'm proudly so, proudly so. I mean, everything you've done. Think about it. Everything that you've done. You know, I've pretty much followed your footsteps, and seems to be turning out okay. You know. So welcome, and I'm privileged and I'm so honored that I've started this series called the Unlock Jam Room, and you are my first guest. This is the premiere episode.
Aha.
So welcome, and there's so many people already joined in, and so before we get into the discussion, everybody who's present,
First and foremost, let me thank you for having me on your show, and it's of course a pleasure. You know that you have always had a special place in my heart. You know that. From the first time we met in 1996, from the first time I stayed in your house and in New York, and right from there we bonded, and I think we there was a spark, and I took you on as my kid brother, and that's been the way it has been for 26 years. So yes, it is wonderful to be here on your show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're I mean, it's not just a brother, but you've also been a great friend. I mean, I've been able to confide in you about problems that I wouldn't. I know Ma is watching, but you know, even then, I haven't told her about so many things that so to everybody who's watching today, I want to say that the questions that you people have, thank you for joining in once again, but the questions, I will take questions for Vikramda and the discussion a little later in the discussion. I just have a few things that I want to start off with. And so I think one of the main reasons that we have this bond and this connection and you know, the kind of chemistry that happens between not just two musicians but two human beings in our case is the fact that there's a real similarity in the way we were brought up as kids. You know, like you went to America when you were 5 years old, 5.5 years old.
No, I was one when I went, and I came back when I was almost 6.
Oh, you were one when you, okay, so pretty much you were, you know, almost born there
Almost.
Right. So, and so was I. And so that very initial childhood, infancy, we grew up in America. Then you came back to India when you were 5.5. I came back to India when I was 8. And there were adjustment problems. And you went to La Mart's. You went to La Martiniere for boys. I went to St. Xavier's. You know, I mean, you can see where this is going, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit. I know you've spoken about this many times, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about the adjustment and that childhood transition period, because that wasn't easy for me. So I was wondering if you would just...
Yeah, it definitely wasn't easy because you know, even in the late 60s, early 70s, the lifestyle was dramatically different. And I was growing up pretty much into an American kid, and watching, you know, there was 24-hour television even those days in America. And I see my younger son watching TV, and I complain, but I think, you know, I used to do that as well. And I used to watch television, Sesame Street. I used to watch Speed Racer, of course, Tom and Jerry, and all of that, you know, from that period. And oblivious to the incredible incidents happening in and around our house. I mean, I would be watching Sesame Street or Speed Racer while Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab and my father would be chatting in the next room, and it makes me feel kind of silly that why was I a kid then? Why wasn't I a little more grown up, and I could have seen those sessions, and everybody, you know, from Pandit Ravshankar ji, to everybody would come down to the house, and Ustad Zakir Hussain used to live below and on the ground floor for
Oh
a
my God.
period of time in the same house. And there was Pandit Chitresh Das ji also who was living there. So we were surrounded by such great musicians, and
Yeah,
here I was
stars.
wasting my time watching Tom and Jerry, you know.
No, but
But
you
yeah,
were a kid. You were a kid.
yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, in my
Yeah.
adult head, when I look back, I'm like,
Yeah.
why was I doing that, you know?
That's right.
But
Right.
then
Why was it?
I came back over a very interesting incident. My father suddenly decided to come back. Suddenly, it was like my mother says it's overnight. And when I asked
I know
him later
this
on,
incident, but I
he
want them
said,
to hear from you.
yeah. So my father told me later on, much later, that I had called him, I had begun calling him Dad and not Baba. So somewhere in his head, and that's the way he used to think, and maybe he was right, maybe, but it might have been otherwise also. But he thought that I wouldn't imbibe the enough of Indian culture to become a tabla player, because he really wanted me to be a tabla player, because he had struggled so much in his life to become a tabla player, going against family, going against, and he was one of the first ever professional tabla players in Bengal. So to do that, it took a lot of courage, and he was going to be an engineer. He gave it all up and became a tabla player. And then
Wow.
he felt that if my son continues the tradition, then it all makes sense. So he felt if he's becoming this little American boy who's constantly singing Yellow Submarine, and then he's not going to be playing tabla, and he's so
Right.
suddenly overnight he decided, and he came back. And we came back to a Kolkata, which was in the early 70s. There was a
Oh,
lot of political strife. There was incredible amount of load shedding. So it was a
wow.
darker world. And
Sure.
I came back, and I was in a culture shock, and I couldn't speak Bangla. And I was there was a lot of people who made fun of me as a child, because I couldn't speak Bangla, and like bongs, they say tash SJ. So so all of that.
Yeah.
So it was traumatic in a sense, and I apparently I became much quieter in that phase.
Mm.
But in my album Rhythmscape, there's a track called "The Language of Innocence," where I have used a dialogue from that period, from a few years after I came back to Calcutta, and I spent a couple of years just looking out of the window from the balcony, looking at street children playing downstairs. And
Mhm.
I didn't have the courage to go up to them and ask them, can I play with you? Because they
Right.
would
There's a
think I'm
child.
a tash, or I would think, maybe they would think, oh, he's got this American accent, he doesn't speak Bangla, and maybe I wouldn't be accepted. But then one day I mustered up the courage, and I went down, and I asked one lanky tall boy, "Hey, am I khelte nibi?"
Cheltenham.
And he said, "Ha, chole aay, come." So, AMI Khiltinibi is, for those who don't understand Bangla, it means, would you let me play with you? And that I took as a little dialogue and put it into Language of Innocence, because it was a turning point for me. That was my first acceptance in Kolkata/India. And that boy is still my friend, and Shoumitro. And he lives in America now, ironically. The roles have
Okay.
been swapped. And so yeah, so that was a difficult period for me, because I underwent a personality change, because I had to readjust, reorient myself. But then, kids are kids. So within a couple of years, 2 3 years, I was sorted. I was again playing. I found new friends. I found some great friends who have been friends for life. So yes, but yeah, that was a turning point, and which is why I thought it was important to put that into a work of music, which was
Right.
personalized.
Right, right, absolutely. This is amazing, this story, because if I may share, the my father was he was a Bengali writer. He made a documentary film. He was an actor. He was heavily into Bengali literature, and
Mm-hmm.
my mom, as you know, was a singer. She sang
Of
Rabi
course.
Sangeet, all that. So there was a time when I was like 5 years old and Moinak was 4.
Mm.
Um, we started, we were only speaking English at home, and so there was a rule in my house that if I didn't speak to my parents in Bangla, they wouldn't respond.
Right,
and
right.
that was a mandate. And so we spoke to them less and less. And so for the exact same reason, my father decided that no way. I mean,
Hmm.
uh, they already thought that I have to play tabla because I was, a young kid playing with the tabla, not really playing
Hmm.
tabla, but that was my toy. And Adi Akbar Khan Sahib had recommended that I be taken back to India because, now you can grow up in New York and actually become a tabla player. There are
Yeah,
several
yeah.
people who are doing that in England, guys like Gulden and all these people, they're playing really well. And
Hmm.
but when I was, growing up in the 80s, you couldn't train to become a professional tabla player staying in New York.
Hmm. Hmm.
So for the same reason, we came back here, and we hated it here. It was hot. There were mosquitoes. There was no McDonald's. There was no steady. There was all the same problem. I'm telling you, like there was no
Hmm.
Coke. There was no
Hmm.
Pepsi. There was nothing. Like at
Hmm.
that time, the closest thing we had to that was something called Campakula, if you remember in those
Yes,
days,
of course.
right? So but and then just going a little forward, then you got admitted to Lama Union for boys. So and at the same time, I've heard stories from you, and I've heard stories from other people like Raza Ali Khan Sahib, bhai, Guddu bhai,
Yeah,
that you used to you spend a lot of time in their house
of
and
course.
playing with them and Munabbar Khan Sahib and all that. So how was that balance? That again is a really interesting, like going to Lama Union for boys, listening to Bee Gees and whatnot, and then
Well,
going there.
I I I think the next period, which is what Gudu Bhai talks about, has spoken about to you, was a very very formative period for me as a musician, and I realized that much later because I was being heavily trained by Baba in tabla, and my school bus would come at 6:30 in the morning, and I would be woken up at 5, and he would see to it that I would practice for at least 45 minutes, if not an hour, and then get
Before you
ready
went
and
to
go to
school.
school. Before I went to school, the school bus would come at 6:30. So that he was always an early riser. He would wake up by 4:35. So he would wake up and then wake me up, and I would practice, and then I would be off to school. And then on the way back, the journey was interesting because I didn't take very often didn't take the school bus back. On the days my mother went to Munawar Ali Khan Saab's house, Gudu Bhai's house, I would walk down to Balu Haqqaq Lane, which was their house, Bade Ghulam Ali
Right.
Khan Saab's house, and uh, I would be there while my mother took her lessons from Khan Saab. And not only was she there taking lessons from Khan Saab, but who not,
Oh, of
from
course.
from Shondhamashi, Shondha Mukherjee to Ajoyda. People frequenting that space included Ghulam Ali Ji, the ghazal singer, included
Of course.
Virat Khan Saab's family, and so many people. Boltuda, the
Of course.
Omar Haidar, who's now
Yeah.
a great show. He runs show house. So all kinds of people were hanging out there, and musically oriented people.
Right.
And I would enter in my half pants and my Lamatnia tie, and Khan Saab would say, "Bumba beta aa gaya, abhi baith ja, theka laga." But what's important, where was I coming from? I was coming from Lamartnia, where there was no classical music those days, nothing happening, not even nearabouts. And we had a band in school called the Satellites, which I joined, and I was playing congas there in that band, and my father was very upset that I was doing that because he was always concerned that whether I was going to be a tabla player or not. So I was doing that. We were
Right.
doing Bee Gees covers, we were doing Beatles covers, we were doing Rolling Stones, and
Right.
once OCBisa came in 1982, we were doing OCBisa
Right.
as well. Ojai,
Yeah.
Ojai, and all of that. So I wanted to be taco potato those days. So
Of
I was
course.
playing
Who
congas.
didn't?
Yeah. So then from there, walking down to Balu Haqqaq Lane and straight away getting into their house and starting to play.
Oh,
Sorry. There was a call which I had to cut
yeah.
out. Uh,
Right. Right.
yeah. So So, Balu Haqqaq Lane, entering their house and hearing from the ground floor, Kinare Kinare, Ayana Balam,
Yeah.
what have you, really. And entering and immediately Munawar Khan Sahab saying ki Aja beta theka bhaiya. So the jump from playing a Bee Gees, a conga with the
Congas
Bee
or the
Gees
PG song.
to tabla sangat with Kinare Kinare was my life for a great number of years, my whole school life. And I think that juxtaposition is what inspired the music later on as a composer, and what we kind of call fusion, for want of a better word. But the juxtaposition of two forms or multiple forms was already happening in the head, because I was
Right.
there in a certain cultural milieu musically in the morning, and from afternoon it was a completely different space, and in the evening it was at home taking talim from my father, morning riyas, and then going to school, and then playing congas. So it was all kind of a khichdi.
Right.
And I started making some kind of sense of that khichdi, and segregating the lines, overlapping lines, and creating music of two diverse genres, and then later on merging them as well, and making sense of the merging. And I think that's one of the main reasons that I started composing the way I started composing, that
Right.
with the Indian soul and the soul of Patiala Gharana, and then with all this mishmash of other cultures coming in. So I think that's where it all began.
Um, a small question. What is the age we are talking about when this happened?
We are talking about, I would say, 7 to 15, 16, 15, 7 to 15, 16,
So that's a
7, 8
very
years.
impressionable age for a
Yes.
child growing up. So wouldn't you, or maybe your father, be sort of wary or worried that it would kind of create a concoction or like confuse you to a certain extent?
He was worried, and as I said, he was worried, and he was a bit upset that I was kind of doing all of this, not because he thought it was anything wrong to do, but he thought it would take away my focus from tabla riyaz. So, but I think I kind of convinced him with my diligence to the subject that I meant business with tabla, but I also I'm having fun with this. So, and then Baba himself was doing music of the drums those days. So
Right,
all
of
these
course.
instruments were in the house.
Uh-huh.
There was a dholak, there were congas, there were bongos, everything. And so I was playing that as well. So he kind of
Right.
realized that, okay, right, so I can't stop it anyway. I myself, I'm bringing all the instruments into the house, so he's going to be playing all this stuff. And
Exactly. I'm part party.
yeah, so on some level, he accepted it. And later on, we discussed it, Baba and I discussed it. We became great friends, later on. And we used to discuss what he thought, why he came back, what made him insecure when I was not practicing as much as he wanted me to practice. And then when I started doing that, how he felt. So it's all sorted in my head with my
Right.
guru and my father, So that is a
So
great space to be.
that actually brings me to my next question, which is just by the way, this is another striking similarity. My mom also studied with Ustad Munambar Ali Khan Sahab for
Yes,
years.
I know.
So I
Yes.
used to keep going to Balu Haqqaq and that house,
Yeah.
you know, smell of their food and the tanpura and the surma
Yeah.
going and that whole.
Crazy. That
Uh,
was such an amazing place, some an amazing energy, really.
every time I pass that street in Park Service, I mean,
Yeah.
totally saddened that the house doesn't there anymore.
Yeah. Well, you can't hang on to everything in this life.
Right. So my next question is Pandit Shankar Ghosh, an illustrious legend, uh, living legend in his time and then legend of all time. Father Shankar Ghosh and Guru Pandit Shankar Ghosh. What are how do you differentiate
Nice.
and what?
That's a good question, because there's much to say there. And it's very interesting because he made it very clear that he was guru first and father second.
Wow.
He made it very clear because he was very focused in his head that he wanted to impart the education of tabla into my hands and my head and my heart. He was very clear on that. So he wanted me to. He realized that if I am not a bit in awe of him, it's important to have that awe when
Right.
then you learn well, because otherwise it becomes casual, and
Fantastic. Right.
you probably end up playing on his shoulder and not wanting to play. So that kind of thing happens with kids. So he
Right.
made it very clear that I'm your guru, so learn. And what was interesting, and incredibly interesting, and incredible blessing also, really, is that many years later, I was already in my 30s, and I was not I was really not my father's friend, or my father was not really my friend. And I used to always be in awe of him. I used to always think of him as this unreachable state, this person who is so incredible, so high up there. And then I decided one day that I have to penetrate that space. I have to understand him as a man, and I have to befriend him. So I actually,
And
I
what
did,
what you did?
I worked hard at it. I really worked hard at it.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I started chatting with him. I started taking him out. I started, like, come on, talk to me.
Right.
And I realized it wasn't that difficult, because he was bang on. He was like, oh, all right. So if you're ready for this, here it is.
All
And
right.
we became great friends. I mean, the last, uh, I think, 25 years, 25 years, 20 years at least, we were absolutely thick as friends. And we had so much to discuss, because we were father and son, we were in the same profession. He was interested in my journey, I was interested in his journey, his life, my life. So it was fantastic, that whole journey. And those who have witnessed that journey, I think they will vouch for the fact that there was this incredible relationship there. And he was, as I said, he was first my guru in his head in the early part. Not only was he my just my guru, there was something very important and interesting that he told me. Unlike most sons of or daughters, or children of great legends, he said to me, when I passed my master's degree in 1990, he said to me, "I have taught you tabla. I have given you a very good education. Now, what do you want to do? Do you want to be a tabla player? Do you want to be a journalist?" He must have been, his heart must have been skipping 5 beats at a time when he asked me this,
Right.
in
Right.
case I said I'm going to do something else. I didn't bat an eyelid. I said, "I want to be a tabla player." So then right away he says, "Okay, so if you want to be a tabla player, fine. Don't expect anything from me. I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to do anything to help you to become successful, whatever. No recommendations, nothing. No phone calls going to be made from my end." So I said, okay, because I knew him by then as a person. And even if I felt a little bad then, I cannot be more grateful to him for having done that. Because all those who have seen my journey
Sure.
closely, and all my friends in the music world, my friends otherwise from school, they've all seen that journey, and they know how much hard work it was, how I used to go to everybody's house and try to impress them. And uh, but there were incidents where an organizer would call and would ask Baba to recommend people, and he would recommend his other students and never take my name, because
Really?
then somebody would say that, "But your son is playing so well." Then he would say, "But that is for you to say. You say that you want him."
क्या बात है,
So
क्या
he
बात है.
had
हाँ,
he made me work really hard, really
हाँ.
hard. He made me work so hard, and he pushed me so much, challenged me so much, that when I stood on my own feet and I grew my own kind of personality, I think he was the happiest person to see that, because then he knew that now I have helped him become somebody who is really on his feet, and being on his feet is not an illusion for him.
Right, right,
He is not on my lap anymore. He's
right.
on his own feet. So that's
But
what he
then,
wanted.
he took you from his lap and then placed you on his
Yeah,
feet.
yeah. And importantly, he never sat with me. He never played with me in a concert, never took me to play with him in a concert beside him until I was 33 years old. I was already playing with Pandit Ravi Shankar ji Guruji for several years by that time. Then a student went to him and said, "I want to do a duet of you and your son." So then he said, "Acha, ato layak hoye gache." He's become so, he'll play with me. Acha, bring him.
Yes.
Then I said, what? He said, what? You're going to play with me now? I said, well, if you say. By the time I had some confidence also, so I was like, if you want it, then okay. So then we played this concert, and we played for 3.5 hours, and in the concert, he was going wah wah. Unexpectedly, it was a shock for me. He was like, then he would.
Something that never happened before.
I mean, he would say, but not like this. I mean, in a concert on stage, he's playing, and I'm playing something, and he's saying, ye baat, wah wah, and he would look at the audience, and they were clapping, and then he was, like, this is my son, see.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing journey, and that's all because he was such an interesting man, because he had so much foresight to see that this person has to develop on his own, otherwise he will never walk out of my shadow.
What a philosopher! I mean, what vision a man can have as a guru, as a father, as a mentor,
absolutely,
to guide you to that balance. Because it's very difficult. Like, this is kind of like I did this story once, which I scored, which was about Chitrangada training her son to become a warrior, because Bobrubahun was trained by Chitrangada, but later recognized as Bir Bobrubahun, Arjun Putra Bobrubahun, therefore
right.
Which is not true. He was brought up by his mother, and he was trained to be a warrior by his mother, because his mother was a warrior. So that dichotomy between training somebody to be a warrior and when something is happening where he's falling and hurting himself, the mother comes out and wants to go and take care, but the teacher has to go back. Just an extension of...
He would keep saying, my mother would be worried often, and she would feel, she would feel vulnerable for me, because I would fall many a time, and
Sure.
And then he would say to her, and she used to tell me that it's okay, let him fall. He'll sort it out. He's my son. He will sort it out. And I was an only child. There was no brothers and sisters. I was mollycoddled in my upbringing, So for me, it was like, going from this little haven right onto the battlefield.
Wow. I mean, this is an extension of the same discussion, the same topic here, is that, as a musician who has such an illustrious father, there are tremendous advantages, and then there are tremendous disadvantages as well. Unless your father is one like your father, who actually strikes that balance. But I was wondering, because I, as a musician, didn't have that. Even if he doesn't make a recommendation or make a phone call, there are people who are going to be like, this is Pandit Shankar Ghosh's son.
Which is something which Zakirji had said beautifully one day. In an interview of his, and he said, whatever it was, being Ustad Allah Rakha's son was a green card. Wherever I went, I could flash the card and get my entry at least. So yes, that was true for me. I got my entry at least.
Right. So, and then the disadvantage of that being that this constant comparison, I imagine, like this
heavy duty.
Like setting the bar so high as he did, like he has created norms and idioms of tabla playing, and for example, starting Drut Bandish with a tukra or a chakradar. Darbari Kannada, exactly. So like that has become like a thing that we all do that now. So I mean, he has established so many different things in his style. True. So like again, every time you're playing, this one criticism you keep talking about in every interview is like, bape mo to hoini. That little
that phase was real, and it was a real phase. It was not in my head. It was something that was actually happening for some years, because in the early years, and I started playing, and we all started playing very early. I must have been playing concerts by 1985. 84, 85. So what I was 84. Well, I was 17, 18. I don't know. So I was playing concerts from that age, and up until the early 90s, I was hearing still have to work, not like your father. You have to still work, and and openly people saying, coming up to you and saying, why are you not like that? And so it was demoralizing.
Yeah,
But
it's also a very Indian thing, we don't go up to like Bob Marley
no, but
son about let's
I
start
think
sing, can't sing.
I also, Mayookh, with all honesty, I also think it was true because I wasn't playing as well as him, or what I was playing content in those days was not. Bikram Ghosh had not arrived then, and I was playing a wannabe Shankar Ghosh. So you're never as good as the actual guy, So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was I was playing the wannabe. I was playing his Dada Gegna Dingna Gegna. I was playing the stuff that he would play and not play it as well, or at least his he had a huge fan following. All the fans, all his students, and all they were used to
even
him
or
seeing
pure,
Dada or
even
Guruji
or
playing,
it
huh?
wouldn't like
So then he one day sat me down. He himself sat me down and said, I think you're doing it wrong. You have to find your own voice. You have
right.
to find your style, your sound, and I was already learning from Shekharji, Pandit S. Shekhar, the Mridangam Baj on the tabla. I started using those influences in my tabla, North Indian tabla playing, the calculations. I started playing a little bit of different styles, a little bit of Banaras, a little bit of Punjab, and I also started looking for syllables which suited my hand best.
Okay, okay,
So
sure.
everybody has a certain set of syllables which suit their hand best. So
Absolutely.
somebody has a brilliant dhere dhere, somebody has a great ding nada ghene. So there are a few. There is a box there
Yeah,
for
you
any
have to
any
find
tabla player, huh? So you push the box all the time. Of course,
right, right.
but then the best is in those few vanis, And I started looking for the ones which were best with me, and I concentrated on those. And I started changing my style consciously from Baba style into something else. And suddenly I was able to see the light, so to say. I was able to see that I could start playing like this, and it would sound different from him. And I was beginning to like that sound and that style also. So
Well, two
by the
words I
time,
immediately identify with you is that is
yeah,
one.
yeah,
And the other
yes,
one that you told me about a long time ago,
yeah, of course.
signature, the
So
main
this,
figure eight that you have.
yeah, those things I started exploring, and gradually, by the time I was, I played for Pandit Ravi Shankar ji. I had pretty much sorted it out. And when he heard me in '93, I was playing this very interesting baj, which had a lot of interesting calculations, and we were the early birds doing that kind of calculation, very south driven, just one
I
or two
wanted
of
to
us.
come to that. That is the next point
Yeah.
I wanted to discuss.
Go
Your
ahead.
influence of Carnatic music,
Yeah.
Carnatic mathematics, the mathematical approach that they have to where they're actually dealing with aksharas instead of
Yeah.
math, and how that did. I mean, this is a twofold question. One is how that influenced you generally as a musician, and how
Right.
did you incorporate that into your Hindustani aesthetic? Because
Yeah. Very
when
good
you're
question. Very good
accompanying,
question.
like if you're playing a sitar, a rod, or a santoor, you can't actually play the you can't do that because the genre is
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
compatible with that phrasing particularly, right?
Yes, yes. Very,
So
very, very perceptive question. And that's obviously because you have a trajectory on that line as well. And you've seen, the difficulties that are there to take that content and try to place it somewhere else.
yeah,
So,
because I'm a copy.
so I shut up. So now the thing is, first, it was my father who sent me to Pandit S. Shekharji. When he sent me to him, he very consciously thought that it would do me a world of good to learn this system, because my father was one of the early mathematicians of the tabla. He was incredibly great in the whole math of tabla, and way ahead of his time, in the math of it.
Yeah, the
So
jati,
he
especially the jati
yeah.
math.
So he knew the microbeat. So when I was exposed to the akshara, I simply juxtaposed it to the microbeat. It was the microbeat is the akshara is the microbeat. So
Right, right, right.
I had already an understanding of it. when I went to Shekharji, and I didn't know the idiom, but I knew the basic math of it, that it can go in this direction. So
Right.
Baba had already taught me things like, say taka takita taka takita taka takita taka 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 dimi taka dimi taka dimi taka dimi taka dimi taka dimi. So juxtaposing a
Right.
5 on a 4 or a
5, 4, and
4
4.
on a 5, all this thing had happened, and then he had already taught things like right from there, taka takita taka takita taka dimi taka dimi. If we're going to 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. It's, Chakradhat goes 3 times.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
juxtaposing
Is
a
that a
4,
Khandiyati Chakra or
it is in Khandajati, but
right?
it is going in 4s.
It's
It
4s,
is
right?
going,
Exactly.
but it is juxtaposed on. So that is the interesting part of it.
Yeah.
So
That's
this I was already exposed to this. So when I went to Shekharji, I was able to quickly grasp it and
right.
understand it. And Shekharji is unbelievable. He's one of the
Oh my.
greatest mridangam players ever. And
Yeah. He's my
again,
guru.
I know, and you were talking about Guru Bhagya, and that is for me as well.
Oh,
Having gone to him. So I then, coming
Tabla
to the
players are
second part.
going insane, by the way, on Instagram. Comments and comments and comments.
How sweet. So
Gurdain is there, and you
hi,
you
hi,
know.
hi, hi, hi.
Yeah.
So then, interestingly, what happens is, how do you then put it, as you said, as you asked me, how do you use that content in North Indian tabla sangat and in North Indian tabla solo? So I think I was in sangat particularly. I at sometime later I started using 2 tablas. That was a while later, not in the very early days. But when I started using 2 tablas, I was able to play the content of a fair bit of the content of the Carnatic tradition. I was not playing much of the mannerisms. There are
Ah,
mannerisms in every tradition.
beautiful, beautiful.
I was taking the content.
Right, right.
So you take the content
And
and
you
you
transcribe.
tablaize it.
Tabla.
So
Tabla is
you
it? Yes.
so
Yes.
you have to, that is a work in progress there. You have to figure
Yeah.
out, because you can't play the vanis exactly like they do, because their finger technique is different. So
Absolutely.
you use a bit of a different finger technique, and yet you juxtapose it with tabla sounds, tabla syllables, and find a way to mesh the two.
Balance. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then
Transcription.
I started putting that into tabla sangat, and I started playing calculations, which were south calculations, small,
Right.
mostly smaller ones, but sometimes also playing
You
da da
also
da
play
da
last.
da.
Yeah,
Ha,
the
also last the eyes. Yeah. So yeah, yeah.
stuff like all those CIs that you played. Basically,
So even in Tisrajati and all here, so those kind of progressions and regressions I was starting to play, which made my tabla sound different, which made my style identifiable. People would say, "Oh, that's Bikram playing because he's
Yeah,
doing
it's a
some of
very
the
new
Carnatic stuff."
sound. It's a very,
So that, I think, was one of the great things that happened to me. And later on, as a composer, also I have used Shekharji's mridangam extensively on my
oh yes,
recordings, and it's a part
in
of
your shows.
it's. I mean, the greatest blessing is his sound is is uh, is is my sound. His mridangam is a big part of my sound. And then later
Sure.
on, much later on, when the mridangam with the low sa with the hand sonic becomes the rhythmscape sound. So
Right,
that was
right.
all from that fountain.
That is the
You
root.
know,
You're right.
that's the root.
So how just talk a little bit about. I want everybody to hear about the Carnatic Mridangam tabla that you developed. Like, that is a fascinating development.
Okay, so what I did was, uh, the year was 93, and I that was the year I did my first ever tabla solo recording. And that, interestingly, that
The
tabla
one with
solo of
Ramesh
mine,
Kaku, Ramesh Mishra ji.
yes, and
You
that's
played
called talking
Masuk and
tabla.
Tintal and right.
It's called talking tabla. So it's
Talking
been
tabla,
it
right?
was It was released in America on Music of the World by Bob Haddad
Bob
in his
Haddad, yeah.
company. And
Yeah.
later now, it's been, once Bob sold his company to Universal, it's been on Universal for many, many years. And some of the tracks on that album are still very, very popular. They're popular in the world music, sound
Sure.
category.
I remember
It's
that
been on,
album.
it's been on some strange mixes also. And I've been surprised to find Khandam, Khandanarai, which I played on the Carnatic Tabla, being part of that. So what was happening there was I wanted to record the content that I had learned from Shekharji, at least a part of it, on the tabla which I was playing, which was basically a low sa tabla, with a bigger kinar. Now, what you did later on was a step further. You took it a step further because you took the mridangam skin and used it on the tabla, which is pretty audacious and pretty commendable. I mean, amazing. No, I really admire you for that, because I think that's an
No,
amazing
I'm
thing to do.
completely inspired from what you just. I was looking for the mridangam sound, like you said, the manner that
So
you
I was
didn't get in.
doing some crazy things. I don't know if you've done that. I bet you must have tried it also. Huh? I was putting matchsticks.
Oh my God! Of course, for the buzz,
Yeah, for the buzz. So I told my tabla maker to give me a big kinar for the Carnatic tabla. I called it the Carnatic tabla. The recording is there as the Carnatic tabla, and I used to put a matchstick, break it, and put it inside to get the buzz.
Yeah.
So all
You
of this
see,
was
all
happening.
there's a huge matchstick right on the kinar, stuck inside the kinar. Yeah, because I mean, otherwise we don't have mridangam makers here to keep buzzing us up,
True.
right? So, but the one thing that I had to tweak what you did, and I was also, when I met Shekhar uncle for I was doing a dance composition, and I had to like work with him because he was the mridangam player. We had to hire him, and I fell in love with him because the way he spoke, the way he did his konakol, he sounded like a mridangam. Like there is no difference between him playing and speaking.
Right.
And so I fell in love with that tremendous, thudding thing, and then I started studying with him, and what I actually picked up is what you avoided, which is the mannerism. Like
Yeah.
So even on the baya, I was putting this like extra pressure, making it
Like
sound
the gumki, little gumki-ish. Yeah.
A little gum factor, yeah, gum factor. But less modulation, less of
Yeah.
the stuff that
Correct. Of course.
So absolutely, I mean, what a thought! I was just amazing. Can I shift the topic a little bit to something
please.
very, very musician BICKRAM GHOSH, brand BICKRAM GHOSH.
Mm-hmm.
So the differences between that, because like you have very consciously showed us that you have to focus and create a brand. A brand doesn't happen by itself. It is something like just the amount of effort and intelligence and study that goes into becoming a musician of your caliber. I mean, if not the same, at least a huge amount of effort, thought, study, analytics goes into creating a brand, because there are many masters, and obviously I'm not going to take many masters and great tabla players, but there are not many brands as tabla players. I mean, of course, given Zakirji being the benchmark there.
Of course.
As a brand, right after that comes your name as a, So how did you create? Because I saw you do it in front of my eyes.
Yeah.
I saw it.
And that is why Mayookh, this particular interview is of all the interviews that I've done, this particular interview makes more sense to me, is making more sense to me, because you're doing it and you're asking me these questions, and these are questions I don't get, I almost never get, but those who have seen it, and I'm happy to talk about it, because it is a very, very important journey as a tabla player. So there came a time in my life, in my late 20s particularly, when I started thinking that I am playing tabla good enough to impress the entire community, and including the greatest, Pandit Ravi Shankar ji, who really, by taking me, endorsed me, and I was in the big league, so to say. Then. Yet in my head, I was feeling there is more. There is more. And what is that more? Now, that is a very tricky question, because the minute you say that, one set of people say, why more?
Right.
Why do you need anything else? If not more, why something else? If you're in this unbelievably great tradition, why do you want to do something else? That's when I say, to each his own. Now, I wanted something else as well. I wanted new challenges. I thought I had done as a tabla player, as content, as what I was playing. I thought I had done pretty well, and I was in the top league, and I was comfortably playing with everybody, and I was already liked, admired, etc. for it as a pure tabla player, purest tabla player. And I had also played a huge amount of Carnatic concerts with Balamurali Krishna ji, with T.M. Krishnan ji, with Kadri Gopalnath ji, everybody. I played with everybody. So all of that having been done, a question started arising in me. What else? What then? And I am a person who tends to get bored easily. It happens to me. And I want to do different things. I want to try it out. So that's my personality. Now, there is no denying a human being's personality. You have to follow that path. And I also started feeling, why is it that, after playing such brilliant tabla, so many tabla players are less known, are not known, are still struggling? Why does that happen? And I started really entering into the mindset of that space. What is it what does it take to come out and be somebody who is a brand, as you correctly said? Why is it necessary to be a brand? Now, a brand is a much maligned word, but why is it important to be a brand? I'll tell you the most important thing. The most important thing is opportunity. If you are a brand, people give you unheard of opportunities. Things that would never come to you otherwise come to you when you are a brand. And people will ask you to play all kinds of concerts. They will ask you to come. Why did people start asking me to compose for films? Because I was a brand, not because I was a great tabla player. They thought that, okay, let's get this guy. He's a brand and he's a great tabla player and he's interesting. Let's get him. So opportunities come your way when you become a brand. And I had always thought that the greatest task would be to get somewhere with this instrument, with this incredible instrument, and to play well would be the greatest challenge. And having gotten a certain distance with it, and with everybody saying wow and all of that, and even my own guru, my father, in a concert saying, wow, beta, I was like, I got the ultimate endorsement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've pretty much reached,
So
if there is such a thing.
That, even after that, why is it that I don't get what I desire in terms of A, opportunities, B, in terms of just the what to say, the recognition, that
I have a really nice anecdote that you had told me a long time ago, very small anecdote. There are two boys who recognized you somewhere at the Howrah station while you were having tea. And you said, came up to you and said, "Acha, apni ki BICKRAM GHOSH." And your answer was, "Keno, apnara ki police theke?"
So I wouldn't believe that somebody would recognize me, and all of that was there, and but then I wanted that to happen because I knew that without a certain amount of influence, you cannot get opportunities. And I had a lot of things in my head. I had what came out later was I had a sound in my head with a rhythmscape, with a drumscape, with whatever I was doing later on. The sound was there in my head. I knew that I can do this, I can combine with this, but who's going to sponsor me? Who's going to give me the opportunity? Who's going to give me a concert? Who's going to say, okay, do it, and I will call people? Who are the people who are going to come to listen to me if I do that? They'll all say that this guy is mad. He's been playing top-end classical music. Why is he going to do this? And why should we go to listen to him? Exactly. The only reason they will come to listen to me is if I have some brand value. So then I went about meticulously trying to make that happen, and I found, ironically, it was not that difficult as becoming a great tabla player. Becoming a great tabla player is 50,000 times more difficult.
I'm sure.
But
could you give us tabla players and aspiring musicians a little bit of advice on how to go about doing something like that?
See, you have to you have to create, first and foremost, you have to create a sound. And this is not the sound just with tabla. So the sound I created included the low sa, the high sa, the hand sonic, the body, the way body / cheek, the way I read the bowls, then
Absolutely.
The music compositional skills, how to bring an act together. So when Rhythmscape first came out, it was an instant hit. People loved it right away. Like, yes, the album took about 4 months to start going off the shelves, but when it started going off the shelves, it was off the shelves for a decade,
Absolutely.
So that sound, to create that sound, it takes a lot of hard work. I can tell anybody who's listening to the show, don't think that just knowing tabla is going to do it. It's a research which takes years to do, of sound, of frequency. You know what I'm talking about. Frequency, huge game changer. Why do I need a hand sonic low SH101
because
on
you
my
need
left
a
hand?
sub. You need sub information.
I need a sub. I need the sub. So, and then the high sa doesn't quite go with the sub. So the low sa comes into play there, So all of this,
situation there.
and I would see somebody like a Trilogutu doing having a kit with the drum kit and tablas, and then I'm thinking, what is my kit then? How do I make a kit? And even Zakirji has had shows with a kit, and his kit has a different setup. So I started thinking, what can my setup be? What can my signature setup be? So I chanced upon the hand sonic, and I complained to the after
another phone call.
Yeah, I know you must be getting a phone call. So after the HPD 15, in the HPD 20, they didn't have the SH101 bass guitar tone, and I endorsed Roland. I endorsed the hand sonic.
Really?
So I'm like, guys, I endorse you, and you don't have the SH101, which is what I do. So I had to import the sound from the HPD 15 into the HPD 20. And I've imported. So they have promised me in the next edition of the hand sonic, they will have that sound back. So
Vikram, our session has been 1 hour, and Instagram is giving me a message saying that there's 1 minute 40 seconds remaining.
Okay,
does that
so
mean we should log off and log back in? Because
whatever you like.
Please.
Sure, no problem. I'm okay with that.
Okay, wonderful. I'll just log back in and just send me an invite. It'll just be 2 minutes. Okay.
Done.
Guys, stick around. We're coming back live in 1 second. Okay.
Yeah.